Hi, I'm Christina Morgan, and welcome to the West, a Narrative History, Chapter 5. We've been talking about the Hellenistic era and the rise of Rome. In Part 1, we talked about Alexander the Great and the rise of the Hellenistic era. In Part 2, we talked about Hellenistic civilization. In Part 3, we talked about the origins of Rome. And now in Part 4, we're going to talk about the Roman Republic. Um, the Roman Republic, there's a legend that claims that the son of the final king of Rome raped a virtuous Roman matron, and as a result, the Romans drove out the monarchs and were determined never again that they would have a king. So there's this big idea in Roman history, the Roman mentality, in all of Roman culture or Roman mindset that there will not be a king. It plays a large part in all of Roman history as far as how all of the leadership of Rome will approach how they come about dealing with Roman citizenry is this idea that Rome will have no more kings. But the Republic, from the beginning, has two classes, plebeians and patricians. Patricians are sort of the noble class, and plebeians are kind of everybody else, the more common class. And it's a republic, which is not a democracy. A republic means there's people that represent you to vote, or there's a government that represents the people. A democracy is, where the people vote directly. A republic, people, their representatives are people who vote for you. You don't run the government. Every single citizen doesn't have a say in the government. Family was of extreme importance in constructing identity in the Roman Republic. The paterfamilias, the father of the family, had absolute authority to the point of being able to order the execution of a member of the family if he felt it was necessary. So your name, everything was determined by your father's name. So it was very identified by your family. Everything was about family. There was something called the struggle of the orders that comes about, and this is what happens is the plebeians are a class, so it's a social class. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't earn any money. It's a social class, and so there are plebeians who are wealthy, who maybe either have as much or more money as people who are in the noble class. And if you're in the noble class, you have more rights than the plebeians. And so this became kind of an issue of rights and privilege. And so some of these wealthy plebeians want to be included with the elite of the patricians. And basically, this is kind of all settled by 287 BCE. There are some codes and laws set, like the 12 tables, and some different things where they try to codify what's okay and what's not okay, where they make some laws, try to rectify some of this social disorder. This complex organization of office holding that results was designed to prevent any individual from acquiring enough power to become monarch. So we've got to kind of satisfy all the different elements of society, the rich people, the poor people, the nobles, the commoners. We need everybody to be happy, but we also need to make sure that no one person has enough power that they can ever become a king. So there's kind of all these different elements going on in the Romans' minds as they're trying to set up their political system. They end up limiting the terms to 1 year, with power shared among two or more officers whenever possible. And a Senate of roughly 300 members serves as the central decision making body. And the Senate will have power for, or be in existence for many, many years, having more or less power depending on what's going on in the empire or the republic at the time. But the Senate will exist for a long, long time. And they have sort of a patron client system. A patron would be kind of the rich person or the person with money or means, and the client would be the people who are dependent on him or the people who rely on him. Essentially, what happens is the control of the republic is held by a small number of aristocratic families, and everyone has to adhere to traditional values that are adhered to moral codes of the past. So there isn't a lot of freedom here. So, can a system created for the inhabitants of a few be transferred to a world empire? So, this system that's been designed for just the little bitty Rome, can it transfer to the whole empire that they're going to have? We'll see. So, they start developing an empire. There's a federation that retained control over domestic affairs, okay, but they submitted foreign policy and contributed to the army. So basically, originally Rome was a bunch of city-states, more or less, that all report to Rome, but they have their own individual authority in their little area. And they just give troops to Rome, and they have to do whatever Rome says as far as foreign policy, but Rome really didn't tell them a whole lot of what to do unless it conflicted with what Rome wanted them to do. And they had Latin rights. So in Rome, this is sort of Rome's policy for a lot of its empire. They were one of the few empires that was very good about self-rule, or allowing colonies to have some input in their own rule. Rome consolidates control over all of Italy by the 3rd century BCE, and then it wins the first of two what are called Punic Wars, and this has to do with the Phoenicians, against the Carthaginians in North Africa. The Carthaginians were the Phoenicians, kind of the same thing. Initially, the interest in the Punic Wars were defensive, but it escalates into this big, long conflict, like a lot of times it does when what starts out as a small thing turns into a big thing. Probably the most famous battle episode in the Punic War is the fight with Hannibal in the Second Punic War, which actually is 14 years long. And Rome suffered great losses. They ultimately won it, but really the most famous battle, the most famous thing that people remember is Hannibal, in an attempt to sneak attack Rome, marched over the Alps with war elephants. He went through with a series of massive victories, but in the end is defeated. Rome claims their expansion comes at the needs for defense, but it's pretty clear they don't have a central plan for organizing the empire that they win. So it may be about defense, but they don't have any system for organizing it. After they defeat Carthage, the Romans launch another war against Macedonia, and this is part of the Alexander the Great, one of the successors to Alexander the Great. And as long as the Greeks are disunited, they don't pose a threat. So there's no real threat from that era. The Third Punic War ends with a complete obliteration of Carthage. The first two times that Carthage was defeated, they allowed it to stay, but the third, when the Carthaginians came back a third time, Rome just completely demolished it. So with this, Rome moves into the Hellenistic world, but it doesn't really seem to want to annex Greek territory and become permanently entangled in all the infighting that's going on there. That's a map of that area. So there's a lot of stress that comes with this success, and Polybus credited Roman success in empire building with their institutions. This balance between the monarchy, which with the consuls, the oligarchy, the Senate, and democracy, the popular assembly. So they had these three things going on instead of just kind of one autocratic leader. But it wasn't sufficient for just the city-state of Rome, much less the whole empire. And the altered life for the rich and the poor in ways that didn't really help either. About 50 families had most of the wealth of Rome. But the foreign entanglements with the Western and Eastern Mediterranean made a lot of money. In financial and military terms, it was very beneficial. And the imperial expansion greatly altered the Roman economy. There are huge supplies of slaves that were captured in war, and they're put in what are called latifundia, or what we know as plantations, large estates. And so small farmers are displaced because now there are large farms competing. And there's agribusiness, or wealthy farmers who grow large cash crops that are displacing these small farmers. So where are displaced peoples to go? What's going to happen to all these small farmers? So there are two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They propose a series of measures to redistribute this surplus public land that the wealthy had been absorbing. But they're both assassinated, so their public works plans were not popular at all. And by the late 2nd century BCE, violence is just a permanent component of politics in the elite. And the elite split into two sides, the populares, or the popular faction, and the optimates, or those who prefer the best people. So it's like, do we want whoever's popular with the people, or do we want who's best for the job? There are military reforms by Marius that turned the Roman army into a more political machine, and now various generals command the loyalty of their troops, and that they're supposed to be committed to the interests of Rome, but really they use them to sort of take control. So that's the end of part 3, Roman Empire. We're going to talk about Roman civil war and the triumvirates up next in part 4.